This is Perspectivas Latinas, a community service of CAN TV. I'm your host, Juan Carlos Hernandez. Our guest is Ramiro Javier Atristain Carrion of the Chicago Symphony Orchestra Latino Alliance. He is here to tell us about his efforts to help engage the Latino community with the orchestra. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Well, let's first start talking about this organization and how it came about. Tell me the whys of it.
It's a group of Latino professionals that sort of aligned itself with the symphony to really bring more professionals to participate and take advantage of this great symphony that we have here in Chicago. And so we have planned different events. We've done 4 or so, or maybe more, networking events around concerts. We've been able to meet the conductors, the artists, leading artists, and so forth. But more importantly, we've been able to develop relationships amongst ourselves, network, and particularly, enjoy timeless music that the symphony plays.
Right, but it's not just about networking, as you said, right?
Correct. Well, networking is sort of the hook in a way. I think the most important part is to really get to recognize what a treasure the symphony, the Chicago Symphony Orchestra is, first of all, and then to just enjoy the concerts, enjoy the music, and learn more about it, because even if you are not as aware or know as much, you can definitely know not only by attending the concerts, by the lectures and the different activities that the symphony has. And by the way, one important thing is that a lot of our kids today are exposed to classical music in the schools. They are brought to the symphonies, they are brought to theaters, and the programs in the public schools as well as in the private schools have a lot of classical music components, so they are exposed to it.
So the hook is the networking. You draw in professionals, young professionals, professionals that have been in their area of work for a number of years, and you host these events. So what happens at these events? It's a concert, and you meet the conductors or the composers?
Yes, definitely. Basically, that's what happens. Either we hold a reception prior to the concert or after the concert, depending on what time the concert takes place. And since the symphony has different activities, or I should say different concerts that are geared towards specific publics or themes, then we can definitely curtail the event towards that. And so, for example, not too long ago in March, we had the composer as well as a conductor that came from France to play their piece, the composer's piece. So we were able to meet with them afterwards, network with them, but particularly hear about the involvement and how the piece developed. And this is something the symphony does on an ongoing basis. So we just are part of that, but with a focus to attract more Latinos.
And you mentioned children. I don't think a lot of parents are aware of just how much classical music is actually in their children's lives. How do you certainly hook young professionals, and you mentioned you have different themes. How do you get the voice out for families to bring in those Latino families into
well, that's what we're trying to do, and also figure out what are the best channels. We know, for example, the symphony does programs in schools already, has programs with different organizations such as the National Museum of Mexican Art, as well as the Resurrection Project. So there's been projects that are being ongoing that go out to the community. Right. So in order for the families to come to us, I think we have to promote as much as we can, and through word of mouth, of course, from the professionals that participate. And as you said, the kids are already exposed to it. So for the kids, it's probably just the venue where they can experience more of it.
Right. A few years ago, I remember the CSO played in Harrison Park in Pilsen.
Yes.
Were you a part of that? Or?
I was not part of that at the time, no.
But you're aware that it happened,
Definitely,
right?
Oh yes.
Do you know if it had the effect that I guess was intended of bringing out the community, or has there been any follow-up or thought of saying, let's do another concert like this, or a series of concerts like that?
There are every year.
Every year.
That hasn't stopped.
That hasn't stopped,
It's a different venues or different sites. Yes, that is part of the symphony's strategy to reach out and go to the communities. Yes.
And what does the community say when they see this world-renowned orchestra just a block from their home?
I think people should be happy. What they say is probably that they weren't as aware that this, orchestra is right there in your front yard or backyard, and you have it right there. Hopefully, people enjoy that.
Right. Another curious thing happened this past year, and I know it's not part of the CSO, but it was the first mariachi opera, right? The Cruzar la Cara de la Luna.
Mm-hmm.
And that became a big thing. Do you think is the CSO doing similar efforts of bringing Latino compositions and Latino composers to Chicago to encourage the Latino community to come out more?
Actually, the CSO has been doing that. They have a program to reach out and a network
Mm-hmm.
of contacts that throughout the world they can get different composers, conductors,
Mm-hmm.
and different artists. So every year there is a few that are brought to participate, to be part of a concert. So most recently, again, in December, we had a Mexican pianist, Jorge Federico Osorio, a renowned pianist. We had Hart Bedoya, the conductor, a Peruvian from the Norway Radio Symphony that came to conduct the symphony here. So yes, there's activities like this on an ongoing basis. In June 28th,
Which is fine.
there will be Paquita del Barrio with the symphony as well.
Really? That's
yes,
quite interesting.
Definitely. It'll be a beautiful blend of what they present. And so, yeah, we'll do an event around that as well. Then there'll be one in May as well. There was, every year there's artists like this that are brought. So it is an ongoing thing.
What about because I in my own family, I have been exposed to classical music because I have relatives who studied classical music and now playing in orchestras in Mexico, one cousin that studied in Russia. But I know our family experiences have a huge influence on us. And I have heard from other family members, like, I'm intimidated by classical music. Do I have to know a whole lot to enjoy classical music?
Yeah.
Do I have to does it require some studying before I go there?
Yeah, I don't think that anyone has to feel that way. Unfortunately, maybe some people do feel that way. I can't figure it out why, but it could be because of just the stigma that at some point that evolved. And I know there's been a trend for particularly people that grew in the 70s or 80s where classical music wasn't necessarily part of their top choice of music maybe, and so maybe some of those aspects. But in general, if you really go to the little towns everywhere in Latin America, you will hear the local orchestra, the local little symphony or chamber orchestra playing pieces, and as well as playing local pieces. So, and then the other piece, as I said, our kids are already exposed to this music. Hollywood exposes us, everyone, to classical music. We just don't know it. We just don't think of it that way. So, do you really need to know about it? No, it's like any music. Music it's a universal language. So, it is just something that has been, it's timeless. Timeless music, particularly classical music, or from the different periods that, has transcended through different epochs. And actually a lot of composers, a lot of musicians that have learned, studied, or before or after become, better by learning more about it.
So I have also, I just refer back to my family because of the experience with classical music, but also the experience with rock and other genres. How do you help awaken a love or an interest in classical music when a young person wants to listen to or thinks that they listen to is rock or rap or?
The best example I can think, I know a young recently graduated from high school that has gone on to college that loves to play the guitar, and obviously was in love with rock and guitar focused to rock. At some point in his senior year, he heard some pieces from a more classical background, and he sort of connected with that and then got into that. And all that has done is complemented what he can play and what he can do with rock. And so, as I said, music is such a universal language that it's not something you can segregate and say, oh, it's classical music, I'm not going to learn or I'm not going to enjoy it or anything like that, yeah.
Okay, great. What about those of us, yourself included, who are not musicians? In your own experience in your life, what has classical music done for you and meant to you?
Well, to me, it's like someone said at some point, is how feelings sound, right? When you hear music sometimes of that nature, it is so profound and so, it doesn't have to have the lyrics necessarily. And so hearing lyrics in music is great and it tells you a message, but then without the lyrics, sometimes the music, you get to hear and focus more on the instrumentation and how the instruments sound and what that all means and the emotion that comes along with that. So to me, it's a way to relax, it's a way to sort of travel in my own world and get out of my hectic daily life of work and so forth. So I don't know what it is for everyone, and everyone I'm sure has a different way of looking at classical music or so. But I think it can only enhance your experience as a human being, and particularly having this treasure in the city of Chicago that is world known. When I travel abroad, people always mention, wow, what about the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, or this or that, or Muti, or so, the conductor.
Right.
So,
what experiences in your life brought you to love this music so profoundly?
well, in my case, I was brought up by my grandparents, and they were totally into that. And I remember that my grandfather every morning waking up and turning on this vitrola, which is an old instrument that needed to be hand cranked. And then he had this not vinyl; they were actually those hard records. I still have one as a memory, a souvenir today. So playing that music and they getting into it so much, I think just being exposed to it in my case made me, that was home.
And what pieces would your grandparents play? Your
they
grandfather?
played a lot of stuff, from going from opera to a lot of the Bach pieces, Brandenburg concertos, Vivaldi's, the more typical ones as well as others. And so, to me, some of those pieces already have become part of what I want to hear every so often.
And you mentioned the word travel, that this music can make us travel. What are your plans to travel out into the community? And you have touched on that to some extent as part of the Latino Alliance. So, are you going to form other groups or hoping to make this group bigger? How is that going to, what's your vision going forward?
We would like this group to continue growing. It's a membership-based organization that acts as an advisor sort of or group to or committee for the CSO, for the Chicago Symphony Orchestra. And this is how the symphony, the CSO tries to reach out, obviously, into the community. So the programs that it has established already, going out to the community, I think we want to have more voice into what things could be done, what artists could be brought or so in the future. And that could only benefit not only the CSO as an organization, but obviously our community, highlight our own artists. We have local ones that also participate in concerts every year. In Mariachi Vargas, we've had also from outside, such as like the Venezuelan orchestra that has come in the past. So, those things will continue. I think that's how we can grow our awareness, our familiarity with it, by bringing the community, with things they already know and things they can get to learn.
And I'm curious, you mentioned that you do bring in local musicians. What is your advice to, and certainly I know you're not a musician, but it is a big part of your life, this love and passion for classical music. What is your advice to someone who might be very young and is touched by it and would love to become a musician, a classical musician? What would you say to a person?
Well, not being a musician, probably my advice is not the best, but I would say, try to learn, expose yourself to it, and there are venues where you can do that, and just start by going to concerts, and then you can actually meet musicians after or before, many times afterwards, and sometimes be in the talks that they give before to give you, a brief summary or an awareness of how the music is played, how it was composed, its history or so. And so there are resources out there. There's a whole educational component that the symphony has for that. And so for someone who's already playing an instrument, the symphony has the civic orchestra, another component, which is for young musicians as well. So there's different things, but I would say explore, and that's how you could probably learn more about it. And by the way, try CSO.org, where you could find a lot of this information.
So could you give me more detail about these educational components, especially for some of the young people that might be watching? They're like, well, this sounds really, using their words, sounds really cool. I really, like you're saying, they're exposed to it through film. Yeah. They're exposed to it through their schools, and some mariachi pieces or other Latin American music has a lot of hints or is inspired by classical. And they want to say, well, I would love to grow in this. What exactly does that educational component of the CSO offer them?
Yeah, I don't have all the specifics on this, but I do know that the symphony reaches out to the communities, goes out to schools, and is very open to getting this going. So what I was talking about is there is an orchestra for young musicians, and that one obviously you have to audition and all that. And so if you have you're interested in that, that would definitely be something you should look into. If it's more general, like let's say closer to where I am, then there are the lectures before some concerts and things like that. So I would explore some of those.
Okay, another concern, I think, we've been talking about concerns with classical music and approaching it, and how some of us might feel intimidated or feel we're not educated enough. I think that unfortunately it has that classical music has, I don't know, been placed, that stigma has been placed on classical music, unfortunately, and it shouldn't have it. But some families might say, well, I don't have the money. You know, I have to go downtown, I have to do this. What are you doing to help bring those folks in and tell them, hey, there is something for you?
Well, there are, like the family series, that's not expensive at all, and that's shorter concerts that are matinees as well, that are really geared towards families and kids. The events that we participate, where we arrange or coordinate networking sessions or so, or networking receptions, we have a discount for that. So you can pay as little as $35 for a concert, where in the main area, and that's a tremendous discount. So and so the prices also are not really that expensive. You can definitely, normal concerts are within around that price or so. Today, I mean, if you go to a movie, a family going to a movie, you're going to spend just as much, when you count not only the tickets, but also some of the snacks and all the things that you do.
And parking. Right.
And parking. And so, being in the city, of course, you have access to public transportation.
Right.
So I think the idea would be great to make it a family tradition, to once, twice a year or so, the whole family, and participate in something like this, not only in maybe those family ones, but some of the other ones. And maybe you go more. And the point is that this is a long-term effort where you're really exposing your family to something that is, so valuable. I think also to not forget that your kids are being exposed to this already in schools,
right? That's true.
And Hollywood uses classical music all the time. So the kids are much more aware probably of this music than some of the adults.
All right, definitely. Another thought that occurs to me is we're certainly Latinos, and we have a common bond as Latinos, but Latinos are such a diverse group in many ways as well, right? How do you integrate that into your efforts and expose people to the diversity and wealth of our Latino cultures?
Well, I think that's a twofold answer. One, I'm not sure we can look at it as, we are diverse, but that we are also in the U.S. and in that way we sort of have our own identity in a way as Hispanics or Latinos, right? And so that is a blend of all those different nationalities and countries of origin and so forth. I know more and more Latinos today can identify with foods from all over, whether you have Cuban, Puerto Rican, Mexican, or whatever, and it's part of your experience as a Latin American or a Hispanic or a Latino, however you want to call it, in the United States. So that to me is how our own identity is sort of forging in the U.S., right? We are no longer a little group where we are isolated. So, and the other part to it is that in bringing these other groups, in bringing artists and bringing music from different places, you're also exposing and highlighting that diversity.
Great. One final question. We're basically out of time, and it's about your favorite composer and your favorite piece. Tell me about that.
Well, the Brandenburg Concertos by Bach, Johann Sebastian Bach. I mean, that to me, whenever I am feeling down or whatever, I just turn on those pieces and they just enliven me in a way, so.
Great. Right. Well, thank you so much for coming out to share this information with us.
Thank you very much for having us and letting people know about the CSO Latino Alliance. We can be found, or more information, in cso.org. We're also on Facebook and LinkedIn.
Thanks. Perspectivas Latinas is a community service of CAN TV. If your nonprofit organization would like to work with CAN TV, call 312-738-1400 and ask for nonprofit services. Tune into Perspectivas Latinas for local issues and concerns every Thursday at 8:30 p.m. on CAN TV 21. I'm Juan Carlos Hernandez. Thank you for joining us.